Cryptozoology is defined as the search for and study of animals whose existence or survival is disputed or unsubstantiated. Now, there is debate within cryptozoological circles about what constitutes a cryptid. Regardless of whether or not they believe in the Timberland Titan, very few will dispute his status as the king of the cryptids. But some will object to classifying creatures such as the Jersey Devil or the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, as merely undiscovered animals on account of their apparently supernatural nature. But there's another category of unexplained entities that are controversial when it comes to classification, and those are the subjects of cryptoanthropology. Cryptoanthropology is essentially the study of variants of humans whose existence or survival is disputed or unsubstantiated. Some will argue that these subjects shouldn't be classified as cryptids because they're humans, which are an identified species. Others will argue that they're significantly different enough to be classified as cryptids. After all, in Roger Egerbart's classification system, for the 10 types of cryptids, unclassified variations, such as specimens far larger than documented members of their species, are classified as cryptids. Now, while I'm sure that some of you live for arguments about the minutiae of how to best classify creatures we haven't yet discovered, I'm willing to bet that more of you are more interested in what I mean by variants of humans. Well, there's at least one of these variants that I'll bet everyone watching is familiar with, and they're called ghosts. These spirits are a third of the big three topics when it comes to the paranormal, the other two being extraterrestrials/UFOs and cryptids. And I can't imagine anyone watching isn't familiar with the concept of ghosts, so I won't spend too much time discussing them here. Ghosts are, in my opinion, the hardest to investigate of the big three topics due to the difficulty in discovering physical evidence and how easy it can be to fake it. There isn't too much to say here, but as a heads up, ghosts are probably the most mundane of the different topics I'll be discussing in this video. Now, there's another subject in cryptoanthropology that I believe is the perfect bridge between cryptozoology and cryptoanthropology, and those are the skinwalkers of the Four Corner States. They're said to be Navajo shamans that have gained the ability to shapeshift into various animals. They can acquire this power for the low price of killing a blood relative. Now, typically these animals will either appear slightly off visually, canines not having tails is said to be common, or animals with human eyes, or more often act extremely unusually. Quadrupedal animals moving bipedally for long periods of time is very commonly reported, and this extremely bizarre behavior is what allows them to be identified. Try as I might, I haven't found a story of someone actually witnessing the transformation that these things are said to undergo. The Navajo take these creatures seriously. They don't really like to talk about them or share the information in regards to them with outsiders, but we know they're seemingly confined to Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. It's not very often, but sometimes when I'm researching these entities late into the night, I'm actually pretty glad that I called New Jersey home. In a similar vein to, and often conflated with, skinwalkers are the Wendigo of the Algonquin people. According to Algonquin legend, when the winter is particularly long and harsh, and food is scarce, sometimes people take desperate measures, resorting to cannibalism to prevent starvation. But in an effort to end their hunger, they make it unending, and transform into the monstrous, always hungry, Wendigo. Descriptions of the Wendigo vary, with some stories saying they're disembodied spirits, others describing them as some type of zombie, and the portrayal that I would bet most are familiar with is the Wendigo as a towering figure with antlers and a perpetually exposed ribcage. Wendigo encounters are harder to come by than skinwalker encounters, and that's definitely saying something. Like skinwalkers, Wendigos often get classified as cryptids in a lot of instances, and that's where I might put myself. There are Wendigo encounters out there. Backing their supposed origin story is a heck of a lot more out there than some type of tall bipedal creature with horns existing in the forests of North America. Another entity that's also been lumped in with skinwalkers by some is the Dogman. Now, to most people researching the paranormal, Dogman is a cryptid. Kind of like Bigfoot, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 9 feet tall, bipedal, mostly human body, with a canine head and canine feet. This seems like a pretty clear topic for cryptozoology. A potentially undiscovered animal, if one that is very different from all the ones we have discovered so far. But some people might disagree. You may note that the Dogman is extremely visually similar to another figure in film, folklore, and fright fests, the werewolf. Now, while many Dogman researchers believe these creatures are purely flesh and blood, others believe that they are real-life werewolves. They're born humans, somehow gain the ability to transform into these half-man, half-beast creatures, and, well, I've never seen anyone argue for or against a full moon being involved. A lot of people in the Dogman community are pretty quick to write this theory off, and understandably so. For most people, you're pushing it when you say you think Bigfoot is real. Then you're really pushing it when you say you think Dogman is real. Bring up real-life werewolves, and they might ask what size straitjacket you wear. Now, I'm typically more in the flesh and blood camp when it comes to these things, but there are some stories that support this idea. While I'm obviously extremely skeptical of anyone actually claiming to be one of these shapeshifters, reports of dogmen wearing clothing, and sometimes even clothing that has to have been store-bought, do make me wonder. But while ghosts are pretty well known, if not well documented, and skinwalkers, wendigos, and dogman have been steadily becoming more mainstream over the past few years, what really sticks out about cryptoanthropology are the subjects that truly seem like something ripped straight out of a Hollywood production. Stories of things like real-life vampires, zombies, shapeshifters, immortals, and some entities that look like humans but really seem to be anything but. Sounds crazy? People report these things, and frankly, I don't think I even know how to make heads or tails of it. Like vampires. Yes, people claim to have actually seen vampires. Not going off of stories from hundreds of years ago, or people that got a little too swept up in the Twilight craze. There are fairly modern reports of these things circulating. They're definitely pretty out there, and I haven't been able to find any encounters that seem overly credible, but there are quite a few floating around, and while I'm not sold, I don't think I can write them off completely just yet. Zombie stories tend to come from countries outside of the United States. Haiti is a big one. These things are said to be humans that were raised from the dead via some kind of voodoo, and tend to not come back quite right. Like the alleged modern vampire stories, these are really pushing it for me. You'll have a hard time finding credible sightings, or even just non-anonymous sightings, and the premise is a little out there to say the least. Now, I'm not saying someone rising from the dead has never happened. I am recording this on Easter after all. Moving on to shapeshifters, and I think I should make a clarification. Earlier I talked about skinwalkers, humans that are said to be able to turn into animals. These shapeshifters are said to be able to turn into other humans. Shapeshifter stories are surprisingly one of the few entities in cryptoanthropology where you will actually find someone willing to attach their names and reputations to these stories, even if they are saying that all politicians are lizard people. I do apologize to any lizard people watching that are rightfully offended by the comparison. Now, shapeshifting does actually exist to a degree in the animal kingdom. Chameleons can famously switch colors to hide from predators, and the mimic octopus can actually imitate the forms of various marine animals, so there is at least a little bit of precedent there. Immortals are another type of variant human, and there are some reports, and honestly, they're really just too difficult for me to really be able to argue for or against the existence of. I guess we'll find out if they ever stop making John Wick movies. There are other human variant stories floating around. A good place to start is to go on any major paranormal forum and just search up the term "didn't seem human." Now, I do have reservations about believing in a lot of these supposed human variants. The first, as I mentioned earlier, is the lack of people willing to attach their names to these encounters. Don't get me wrong. I understand the hesitation to be associated with these stories even if they are true. There's a reason that most people who send me their cryptid encounters ask to stay anonymous. However, one of the first things I always look for when researching any cryptid is whether or not people are willing to attach their names and reputations to their stories. The sources of so many of these stories being anonymous internet forums doesn't push me towards believing in them. The other issue I have is inherent to the very nature of cryptoanthropology. It's said that 3 people can keep a secret, if 2 of them are dead, and I'm certainly a believer in that saying. Many of these variants existing would require multiple humans, with capabilities that would largely affect our current understanding of science existing, but for whatever reason choosing to stay quiet. Cryptids are animals. They can't just go to the media about their existence. a lot of stories about the subjects of cryptoanthropology tying to bigger, overarching conspiracy theories, and that's usually where I stop. It's a bit too far above my pay grade. But I'm open to believing in a lot of things that might seem unbelievable. It really just comes with the territory. So, what do you make of cryptoanthropology? Do you think any of these things could really be out there? Have you had any encounters of your own? Let me know in the comment section below.